Administrative notes here. We're going to be muting everybody during Nadav's speech. If you have any questions after Nadav is finished with his presentation, he will take the questions. You're welcome to write them in the chat box whenever you would like, and I will give them to Nadav after he's done. And if you could please, if you're able to rename yourself with the name of your synagogue or organization, that would be great. And I just want everybody to know that this Zoom will be recorded and also live streamed on our Facebook page. I'm just going to speak for 1 minute before introducing Nadav. I hope everybody is doing well during this very difficult time. Israel has been a success story in dealing with COVID, so I hope that after this session we'll feel some positive feelings and we'll get some good information from Nadav. For those of you not familiar with the council, we're a network of almost 140 schools, synagogues, and organizations in the county. Israel has been a major part of our mission since the council was established in 1975 as a consequence of the need to come together after the Yom Kippur War. Our Israel Roundtable, which you're attending right now, convenes regularly to bring together leaders in the community to discuss issues and plan events around Israel. I'm very pleased to welcome Nadav Shachmon, our friend and partner, who is in his second year of serving as Westchester Senior Shaliach. He is part of the Jewish Agency for Israel, JAFE, and his position is funded by the UJA. I welcome Audrey Stein, who's head of the Westchester office of UJA, who's on this Zoom, as well as Zahava Tesfi, who is from the Jewish Agency for Israel. Nadav will speak for about 45 minutes, and then he'll have a question and answer session. So take it away, Nadav.
Shalom, wonderful to see all of you. It's been a while. I was away for paternity leave, as you guys know, and it's been a while, and I have to say that I missed all of you and missed seeing all of you. It's just wonderful. So thank you for coming here, and thank you for the council to invite me to the roundtable. And I'm happy to share with you a little bit about what's going on in Israel and what's going on related to COVID-19. But before I really start, I actually want to tell you a story about my own cousin, Yair. So Yair is one of my cousins who is, let's just say that, always was a bachelor. He's older than me, he's almost 40, but he never got married. Now in my family, if you're in that age and you didn't get married, there is a baya, there is a problem. So my entire family was a little bit anxious and keep on asking him, when are you getting married? Why are you not, serious with any girls? And he was seeing girls. Yeah, it's not that thing. And, a year and a half ago, he came by and said, I met the girl that I like. Her name is Moran. And I think this is it. I think I'm going to really propose and it's really going to happen. And I have to tell you, my grandma, who's 94, was ecstatic. She was like, finally, you're going to get married. And they set up a date and everyone was very excited. That was supposed to be the biggest wedding in the family. He's the last grandchild who did not get married yet. And we have family all across the world. And it was planned to be a huge event with hundreds of people from everywhere in Israel. And then COVID-19 came. And the event was planned to be during the springtime, which is really a few weeks ago. And obviously it wasn't allowed to do any gathering. And by that time of the wedding, they had to do the wedding, the biggest wedding of the family, with only 10 people. One day after the wedding, they got a very interesting letter from a very important person in Israel. My cousin, Yair, got a letter from the President of Israel. And if I may, I would love to show you the letter. And if you guys can see my screen, the President of Israel sent my cousin and his wife, Moran, a letter, congratulate them for their wedding. And you can just see here, it's with the Hebrew, I hope you guys can see it. But this just to show you that two big things, and maybe that's just the beginning of what I'm going to say. The first thing, that Israel took it very, very seriously. Big weddings, no gathering, no contact, people are in quarantine. But the second thing, there was something very special happening in Israel this time. People were close together, supporting each other, helping each other, and supported by the government and by the administration in a way that the President of Israel are sending a letter to my own cousin about him getting married. And that was a big surprise. It was really, really, it warmed up everyone's heart. And of course, they're all going to get married later when things will be better. So today, I'm going to talk to you about COVID-19 in Israel and the way it affected the society, the way Israel addressed it. And I will also going to talk about the political situation in Israel, because we see a connection between what happened with COVID and the political situation right now in Israel. And I know you guys hear a lot of things, so we'll try to make an order, seder, with all that. I think one of the things that kind of everyone knows at this point, that Israel is almost back to normal. What does that mean? The biggest news that we have from Israel is that the fact that schools are back. Schools are back almost 100%. That's the situation right now. The beaches are back. The markets are back. The gyms are back. All those things to us sounds like a dream. In Israel, it's actually happening. And it's been a process of going back to our normality that's been going on for the last weeks. And now it's almost 100%. One of the things that are still not allowed is the big events. So weddings and things like that are still not allowed. And obviously anything related to going back or forth, airport, flying, that's also complicated. But most things, even restaurants and bars, are back in Israel. And just to show you the situation right now in Israel in terms of COVID. So number of positive cases in Israel at the moment is 3,074. I updated it literally just a few hours before this presentation. And the number of people who passed from the beginning of this until today is 277. That's a number that is significant. But if you compare it to other places in the world, to other countries in the world, to a country that has connection, like Israel is connected to Europe and to America with flights all the time, to get a number that low is very, very interesting. And this is one of the things I'm going to focus on. Why is it so low? What did Israel do to make sure that the number of dead of past people who passed is so low? Positive cases still very, very low. Just so you guys know, the cases that were discovered over the last 24 hours were about 20. This is like we had a day without even one case. So that's the situation at this moment. I did, along those things, want to show you that the unemployment rate in Israel is sky high, like everywhere else in the world. But there is a price to what Israel did, and we're going to talk about that. So one of the things, and maybe just to dive into how serious Israel took it. So, of course, all of you know that one of the most important days in Israel, I think the two most important days to any Israeli is Yom Hazikaron and Yom Haatzmaut. And Yom Hazikaron and Yom Haatzmaut is two of the days that I think are the essence almost of what is Israel, of what is being an Israeli. Everyone is a soldier, knows a soldier, heard about someone. We're a country that is constantly dealing with how you fighting, how you defending yourself. And those 2 days, the day when you remember and the day when you celebrate, are the days that everyone comes together and gather together, whether it's a ceremony or whether it's a big celebration. This year, the decision of the government was to actually not even have a option of people to gather. And everything that was allowed was only on TV. There was a complete lockdown. Complete lockdown means even the supermarkets were not open during those 2 days because the government decided that they need to make sure that there was no outbreak. This is how serious Israel took it. A week before the day of Yom Hazikaron, they allowed only families to go see go up to Mount Herzl where the graves are, and you can see here in the slideshow that it's very weird to see families are going to the graves and see their own friends and family with all that mask, and it was very hard for the Israelis. It was, I think, even a bigger sacrifice than this financial sacrifice that people are talking about. But one of the things that they did in Israel, in order to somewhat make a compensation or make a connection to it, was during the Yom HaZikaron itself. One of the main things that happen on TV is actually the main ceremony. And of course, when it's not allowed for people to gather, they said and they asked that during the main ceremony that is broadcast on TV and everyone watch it, it broadcast from the Kotel, and it is what starts off the day of Yom HaZikaron. The last part of the ceremony is actually the tikva. And they asked during the tikva that everyone in Israel that has a balcony will go out and sing the tikva from the balcony. So the tikva will be heard all across from everyone. And with your permission, I just want to show you how it looked like just a couple of weeks ago during Yom HaZikaron when it wasn't allowed to gather. And that's Israel. I hope you guys will be able to hear it. Great. Okay. Part of the tikva says "Liot am chofshi be'artzenu," when everyone is at home, not able to get out, and screaming those words out of the balcony, being a free "Liot am chofshi," be a free nation in our own country. Doing Yom HaZikaron, it added another meaning to it. It created a solidarity and a sense of togetherness that was very special, and maybe that's part of the special thing about Israel. But I want to dive into numbers because that's part of the way to really understand and focus and dive in on what's going on. So when we're talking about this situation with COVID-19, everyone around the world talked about ventilators. And I know you guys heard of it at the beginning. How are we getting ventilators? And all the countries around the world fought for ventilators. In Israel, even when the outbreak was really serious at the beginning, and I gave you here a slide with the dates, you'd see that the available ventilators in Israel was way up than the necessary the people who actually need ventilators. So Israel was always in a good place in terms of the capacity to actually deal with the situation. And part of the reason, and that's part of the reason that things kind of happen this way, is that Israel addressed this pandemic in a collaborative way. Every aspect of the way of the country worked together to fight this. And we'll talk about why it happened in Israel, why it was enabled in Israel. But just an example, here in America, I heard a lot of those of Como. I don't know if you guys heard of his briefing or hearing his briefing. I'm hearing it every day. And at the beginning of the pandemic, he was saying, I don't know what's going on. Every state is fighting from another state to buy ventilators. And they're creating this bubble of price of ventilators, and we're not able to buy ventilators in normal prices. We need ventilators. Why are you fighting with us? He was saying that the Fed was actually raising the prices. So Israel addressed this differently. Yes, they said, okay, we have special force unit, the equivalent of CIA, which is the Mossad. Let's use them. They know how to get things. Maybe not through money, but they have their way to get things. And they got things. And really, in the middle of the crisis, the Mossad actually came out and said there will not be a shortage of ventilators in Israel, period. No one fought with one another. No one competed with one another. They did it very quietly. They used the top of the top unit to make sure that ventilators will be available to anyone who needs it in Israel. So that's part of the reason, the preparation for it. So let's see the curve. Everyone talked about the curve. This is the end of April. We're now in the middle of May. It's still dropping. We can see that in the beginning of April, it was scary in Israel. There was a time when it was we didn't know where it's going to be. We didn't know if it's going to go up and up and up. Obviously, from the 27th of April, it just went down and down. And that's the situation. Now, part of the reason is the way it was prepared in Israel. Israel was preparing to address this in time. We'll talk about that, but what I want to talk about is the hospital system in Israel, or the medical system in Israel, that addressed it differently. So if you guys know, obviously here it's private health system. Whoever have a private insurance will be able to go to get medical attention and be connected to a certain hospital. In Israel, the health system is public, and the health system is pretty good. So you have a situation that before this pandemic actually happened, all of the hospitals got it together and said, okay, this is not one hospital's problem. This is everyone's problem. And the way they did it is actually working together. The hospital in the north, and the hospital in Jerusalem, and the hospital in the Negev, whatever, got it together and said, let's work it out in a way that we'll all have enough equipment, enough beds, enough support to make sure that everyone can be efficient on time. And that's what happened. The connection between the different hospitals really helped prepare to the outbreak of the virus in Israel. And you'd see that along the time there were available beds in hospitals, available beds. When I heard here in New York and other places in the world, in Israel there were a situation when there were available beds that were quarantined and ready and waiting for patients. And that could only happen because they worked together, because every hospital connected to other hospitals, and that's part of the reason it was working. Let's go and see a little bit about the positive cases in Israel in comparison to other places in the world. As you can see here in the chart, Israel is not a low place. The positive cases, and this is again the end of April, in comparison to other countries, Israel was in a jeopardy place. It could have gone to a place when there were a lot of people who got infected and got sick, and God forbid. So the cases were high, but not high as Spain or Italy. What's interesting to see is that even though we had a lot of positive cases, the number of people who died, and this chart is million people ratio, so this is all normalized. If you can see, Israel is very low. By the way, Russia right now is on a higher spot. Israel will be the lowest out of all of the countries here. And the recovered cases in Israel is very, very high. So what we can learn out of the three charts here is that the way Israel was preparing to the situation was effective. Yes, there were people who got sick, but not a lot of people died, and a lot of people got well. So all of those three combined means that Israel did something right. Now I want to show you, and I want to talk a little bit about what did Israel do. And you can see here the steps. I'm not going to go over that. You can see it. But I want to focus on three things. The first thing, starting early. When Israel, we're talking February 2nd, when in Israel, quarantine was started in certain ways. Flight was forbidden from China and from the East, and they actually stopped any communication to China in a point. And we've had quarantine from anyone who comes back from anywhere around the world. That was happening in Israel in February. Here in New York, there was actually nothing significant. And that was the first step. So starting early was really helping Israel to fight this. Now, by February 2nd, by the way, there was maybe one case in Israel, in the entire country. So even though there were not a lot of cases, Israel really prepared and took it early. I can say personally that we always followed what's going on in Israel. I see my family, I see my friends are like getting in quarantine, and every day there's more restrictions. And here it was like, it was nothing. And I was saying to my friends here in New York, saying, oh my, you guys don't know what's going on. It's going to be a pandemic. And everyone's looking at me like, who's this hysterical Israeli guy? And why is he screaming at us? I'm like, you guys need to stop interacting. You don't know what's coming. So that's what's happening in Israel. That's the reason we saw it. The second thing that we can see from this is gradually, the steps were very gradual. Here in New York, at least I felt it was really sharp. The quarantine process was about a day or two, 3 days, a week, and everyone were in quarantine. School stopped very, very fast. In Israel, it was stage by stage, step by step, and that helped the people sort of prepare themselves for the situation. And that was psychologically, it was very helpful. And secondly, here and around that is also this idea that you need to educate people. This is a situation that is very unusual, and it's very new for everyone, and people need to be educated about that. That's why everything was graduate, and there were a lot of effort within making this clear to people why you need to put masks, why do you need to put your gloves when you go out. So a lot of that. The third thing that is very controversial, and a lot of people would be saying that it's maybe not a good idea, is using another special unit that Israel had, which is the equivalent of the FBI, the Shabak. So Israel understood that in order to prevent outbreak, they need to locate all the people who actually were exposed to the virus. And the way they did it, they allowed the FBI equivalent, which is the Shabak, to invade people's phone and monitor people. And that's very controversial. Up until today, people are saying, how can this happen in a democratic country? But basically what it meant is that if I would be exposed to someone that then was discovered to be positive COVID-19, I would be getting a text message from the government, from the Shabak saying, hey Nadav, this one, you were around someone who was exposed to the virus, you should be in quarantine. I mean, you're not able to leave your house. And if I would be leaving my house, they would track my phone and follow me and say, you better come back unless you're gonna get a ticket. And if I would not come back, they would track me and give me a ticket. So people were like, okay, we're tracked. that was very helpful because that helps sort of like monitor people. And you guys know that Israel is a very crowded place and it was very hard to track. So that was a very good way to track people. Another thing they did, when they did lockdown was lockdown. Lockdown means that no one is able to leave, period. You can leave for 100 meters. 100 meters is 300 feet. That's it. No supermarket, no nothing. Of course, the lockdowns were only on holidays, only the Chag itself, like Yom Haatzmaut, Pesach, things like that. But it was serious. It was preventing people from gathering. So that's, I think, one of the biggest steps. And you see the graduate and the way it worked. I want to just show you two pictures that represent the sort of the vibe of what happened. Here you can see a wedding on my right, at least. And one of the steps it was forbidden for people to gather for any event more than 10 people unless you go to the supermarket. In the supermarket, you can be more than 10 people. So Israelis, of course, there's the rule. And of course, they tried to find the other way to go for the rule. So they said, okay, if I can't do my wedding with more than 10 people and I do want to get married, how about I'll get married in the supermarket? So that's what they did. They got married. People got married in the supermarket with all the people who could have gone in. So that would be more than 10 people. And, you get married with a cucumber and a tomato as your best man. That's just a funny way to look at it. Another thing to look at it, or another beautiful moment, is the picture on your left. And you can see Magen David Odom, an ambulance, and this is just a regular shift of people who worked together during this crazy time. They took a break, and you can see that one is a Orthodox doing the tefillah, and one is Muslim doing his tefillah as well. They both pray, but they pray differently. And both of them will go back to the same ambulance to work and to give service to all of the people around. And that was a beautiful photo to see. So even though there's a lot of balagan going on in an everyday life, there's some beautiful moments in time and needs that really warms up your heart and say, יש פה code existence, יש פה hope. Okay. What I'd like to do now is do a little bit of assessment to try to understand with you how was that possible. Now, if we look at it, Israel have two main things that will not allow any of this will happen. A functional government. Israel did not have, at least until yesterday or 2 days ago, a functional government. If you have a crisis like that, you need a government that will function and work together. So, and it happened. So that was a weird thing. The second thing, a lot to do with this virus, is the commitment of the people. The way the people are obeying to all the regulations. Now, we all know of bad Israelis. They never obey really fast. They always find their way to do, and when it comes to following rules, they're not the best. They're very creative, but we're not good in following rules all the time. But here, in this situation, we saw that the government was working collaboratively in a best way, and everyone was actually obeying the rules. Everyone was following. There were situations with the ultra-Orthodox, and I'm happy to explain about it if someone has questions, but more, if you look overall, everyone followed the rules. If we try to understand why, we may look at three things, and maybe that's the answer of everything. First of all, Israel's physical condition in terms of the way it's built. Israel is very, very crowded. And of course, you guys see and saw, and it's a lot of cities and apartments. There's not really a lot of settings of standalone homes like here. And most of Israel is exposed to outbreak in a very dangerous way, just like it happened in New York City. Imagine that happens in center Tel Aviv, center Haifa, and all of those big crowded cities that Israel is very built up. So the risk is very high. Israel is connecting, is very much in communication with Europe and the US, especially New York. A lot of people are back and forth all the time. So that's a very high risk. So that's part of the reason that people understood that we have to close ourselves because the danger is really around the corner. Secondly, is the idea of mutual responsibility. Now, I'd like to explain a little bit about that. Everyone in Israel has to go to the army. It's mandatory. Of course, I'm not talking about certain minorities who don't, but it's mandatory. When we go to the army, we don't get paid like $100 a month. It's not really nothing. Yet we're going to the army to give our lives for the sake of the country, for the sake of the people who live in the country. This is the value that we all raised up on, and we're all there. So you were there in the army protecting an enemy that is external. In this situation, the enemy was internal. But what it did, it created all the Israelis realize that if there's a time of crisis, there's a time in need, you have to prepare, you have to join the fight, you have to support, because this is the mutual responsibility that we all grew up on. And I'm gonna show you another example in a second, but that's something that is part of Israel. Yes, we push in line, and we can be sometimes, some Israelis can be maybe not as polite, but when it comes to crisis, the idea of someone will be dying because of an internal enemy is unacceptable for all of the Israelis I know. Another thing is the idea of personal and national resilience. So unfortunately, Israel is very, I want to say, very familiar with situation of crisis, whether it's a terror attack, whether it's a bomb or anything, a missile flying above heads of people, yet Israel is functioning. So Israelis are very, very used to function in situation of a crisis. It's not a good thing. I don't wish for this to happen, but that allowed Israelis to function in this crisis. They're functioning, and they knew that, okay, there's an idea always risk above your head, and the people need to be in shelter. So you're always in Israel. You plan, but you have this like thing in your head that things might change. And that's part of the psychological abilities that Israelis have developed all over the years, that I don't know if I want to say allowed, but maybe helped a little bit with dealing of the situation, this resilience. I want to maybe give another example of resilience. Israel has a lot of youth movements. It's part of the Israeli, I think, lifestyle, way more than America. And you can see that all of the youth movements were gathered, thousands, hundreds of thousands, gathered to prepare food and deliver it to places and towns and people who need it before Chagim. Even more than that, the army, the IDF, when they quarantine part of the ultra-Orthodox areas, the army distribute food for the Chag to all of the families that live in Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak is one of the most modern ultra-Orthodox cities, the biggest in Israel. And it was amazing to see that the Israel Defense Force is actually connecting with the Haredi and making and giving food, and it was a beautiful moment to see as well. But another way to show resilience is through what happened with the connection of grandparents and grandchildren. Now, as you guys know, the part of this difficulty during this time of Corona or COVID or quarantine is the loneliness. The inability to see your family, the inability to see your grandchildren. And that was part of this. In many ways, it was even more terrible from the financial situation. Israel has this small country. Everyone is not living more than, they don't live more than an hour away, and or 2 hours away. So that enable people, kids, to come and see their grandparents. And there was a trend in Israel, I have to show you this, of grandkids who came to see grandma and grandpa and stood by their window. And I just, with your permission, want to show you this example of this young man who decided to go to his grandmother and sing to her. And he chose to sing to her in Moroccan. And that's the language that he's Moroccan, so he wanted to sing to her a Moroccan song. And the name of the song is Ya Mama, which means my mom. And I'm gonna show you the video of it, but I'm just gonna translate just a little bit just to show you what he's saying, or to give you that. Mom, why did you walk away? You every breath I take. The tears that I have in my eyes, Mom, are for you. You taught me and you worked hard for me. Your beauty, the light of your eyes. My dearest Mom, how much you wanted for me and thought for me. I miss your beauty and the light of your eyes. You walked away and you left me. You left me with nothing. I am dying with my thoughts over you overnight. Me, who you cried for, I will never forget you, my beauty. So I want to share with you how it looked like really. And let's see.
كاركتني وتعجبتي فيا الخلون عزتي لك يا عينيا الوي ما انتي لحنينة الوي ما انتي لعزيزة عرفتي يا دوعية شحال جاريتي وأممتي فيا حسك يا لك يا نور عينيا يا ماما دوعينيا انتي مشيتي وخليتيني يا ماما كيفاش خليتيني ناس ونموت الهموم نهار وليالي انا وانا نسيت يا ليا كل عمري ما ننساك يا غزالي يا ماما دوعيني انتي مشيتي وخليتيني يا ماما كيفاش خليتيني بلاش ونموت نهموم نار وليالي انا وانا لقيت يا ليا كل عمري ما ننساك يا رجالي.
At the end of this, his grandma was like, she came to him and said, "Oh, that was so nice." She was crying and said, "That's so nice that you came and sang for me. But I have to ask you, what about the ring? When do I see you married? This is not good enough." So a Jewish mom is a Jewish mom. No matter if she's Moroccan or no matter if she's Polish, it's always somewhere in there. And it was very, very sweet. With your permission, I know we don't have a lot of time. I do want to talk about the political situation. I'm jumping a lot. I want to talk about the political situation in Israel and just give a little bit of an overview of what's going on. I'm going to do it very, very fast as I can. Bear with me. So I'll be able to leave time for questions. So COVID-19 and the political and the Israel politics and the things that happen. So just a little bit of overview. Over the last year and a half, Israel had about 3 rounds of elections. This is absolutely crazy that you have a country that's trying to get to elect the prime minister, and they just don't manage to get a definite winner. And the problem maybe was in the system or not, but really we could see that there were two main groups in the country. The groups who support Bibi, and we have to say this, that Bibi is very well appreciated by a lot of the people in Israel. The economy in Israel went up and up over the last few years. The sense of security and safety people have is pretty good. That's the situation. Whether you like him or not, it's a different question. People in Israel look up to that and appreciate that. Having said that, Bibi Netanyahu is involved with a lot of situations. He's indicted. His trial is actually starting next week. And people are saying, how can we allow our prime minister to be in court and still be a prime minister? So this whole situation created blue and white. This party was assembled by 4 leaders. There was no one leader. Even Gantz was the leader, but was assembled by 4 people who got it together and said, we can have an alternative to Bibi. And that was the idea of blue and white. Really, really fast. Fast forward to the reality, Corona came along, COVID-19 came along. And after many rounds of election, there was no definite winner. It was clear that Netanyahu was actually getting a lot of strength within the people, because the way it was addressed in Israel, Israelis really appreciated the idea that Israel was safe. It was considered to be one of the safest countries while this pandemic. And polls show that if there will be a 4th election, Netanyahu will actually win. So Gantz decided to break up blue and white and depart from 2 of his partners and to merge to unified government together with the Likud. And after a year and a half that we didn't have a normal functioning government, just yesterday 2 days ago and yesterday, they've set up this huge government that was assembled from blue and white and the Likud party. And what does that mean really? The condition is that it'll be half and half. Half of the time, Bibi will be the prime minister, Netanyahu will be the prime minister for the first year and a half. The second year and a half will be for Gantz, and all the officials, minister roles, jobs, will be distributed between the right wing and the center left. Sounds good, right? Now, always, what will be the cost? So there is a cost. The cost is very, very high, and there's a lot of criticism about this. The first is because it was a huge government, they needed to distribute and give a lot of jobs to a lot of people. Created a government of 34 ministers. 34 ministers, really? We have the Minister of Jerusalem Affairs. We have a minister for the settlements. We have a minister of the water resources. We have a minister of education, but also minister of higher education. That means they created jobs when we have 27%, 24% unemployment. They created jobs, they created offices, they created situation that the government cost way too much money for the people, especially now, and that's that got a lot of criticism about from the people. Secondly, 2 prime minister residents. 2 residents, isn't it a spend of money? That's a lot of the things that people are saying. And then Bibi or Netanyahu. There is now, I think, from a long time, there is a date when he's not going to be a prime minister. Again, whether you approve of this or not, it's a different question. But this is what Netanyahu had to put at stake. This is the first time when he's leaving. There's a date. He already said that he's going to leave. People are saying maybe yes or maybe no, but this is what schedule. And Gantz, blue and white leader, he had to take a really heavy price. And he's basically turning away from his promise to electors. He said, anything but Netanyahu, choose me and I'll show you an alternative. And yet he's going to Netanyahu to create this unified government. So that's a high cost. They say that it could be the end of his political career, but who knows? Israel is always full of surprises. At this stage, I would actually stop, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Let's do stop sharing. If I'm able. Okay, now I can see all of you.
Hi, Nadav. There's a question about the ages of the people who tested positive for corona in Israel. Is there a chart, or is there any information you have how it compares to other countries?
There is a chart. I don't have it right now, but I know there's a chart. In terms of the ages, it attacked overall in the same pattern that it attacked here. We can see people from certain ages that were more inclined to be sick, that were more at risk. And we see nursing homes and people, areas like that were more affected by it. And of course, kids that were much less affected by it. So the patterns are very much the same. Interesting fact that people are saying, about this is that if you look at the countries around Israel, Egypt, Jordan, all those countries in the Middle East, even Greece, that is not too far from Israel, we see very low numbers of cases overall. So some would say this is not really a big success of Israel. It's just the Middle East that maybe something in the weather. So it's debatable because, again, Israel is very connected to Europe. I don't know. The research is very premature at this stage, but that's another data that we have.
Okay, there's a question about the school openings. In the news, we saw that some recently opened schools had to shut down again.
Yeah, so what they did in Israel, they opened the schools, and summer camps are open in restrictions. So they're taking it step by step and then monitoring it. And that's pretty cool. That means it's allowed to go to schools, but it has to be with social distance. The kids need to have gloves and masks and everything. And then monitor what's going on. So if there's an outbreak in one of the schools, they shut the school. They will shut the school in that particular county and that particular region, but they will allow the system to function. They will allow the parents to go to work. They will allow the kids to interact in a way. So that's what Israel is doing. Some would say it's actually been very useful and helpful because, the economy is actually back in a way.
Okay, there are a couple of political questions. Can we believe that Bibi will actually give up his prime minister position to Gantz after the year and a half? And can he possibly dissolve the government before Gantz takes over?
So last night I stayed up late and I watched an interview with Gantz. And the reporter asked him, so do you really think you're going to be the prime minister? To him, like, really, do you think it's going to happen? And he looked at the screen and said, you know what? I certainly hope he would, and I certainly hope that will happen. What will happen? No one knows. We know that there is an intention from him. At least it's written intention. I don't know if it's something that will happen. And we're just going to have to wait and see for another year and a half and see what happens in the politics. But that's the plan right now. Whether it's happened or not, mi yodea.
Okay, a question about the ultra-Orthodox. Considering that it took a while for the ultra-Orthodox to comply, for some of them to comply, and many of the cases came from the ultra-Orthodox community. What changes do you think will happen, or what do you think should happen in Israel to make sure that this won't happen again, that there'll be better communication with the ultra-Orthodox?
It's a really good question. It's actually a whole part of the presentation that I didn't have the time to present here. But this outbreak of this virus really emphasized the tension between the Israel country, the state, and the ultra-Orthodox, that minority. When we talk about the modern Orthodox, I don't know if I can share it. I won't share it but basically we're talking about a minority within the minority. The majority of the ultra-Orthodox community was actually compliant. They actually did what they were told. But it's enough that one yeshiva would be open that everything will be like that. And one of the interesting facts is that the Minister of Health in Israel is actually an ultra-Orthodox from Gur Hasidi. So, and that's where a lot of the outbreaks came about. So there is a tension there. There is a lot to do with this mutual responsibility that I talked about, that really not existing in that in high extent in the more ultra-Orthodox community, but they did manage to give it an answer. What they realized in Israel is that the way they communicated with this population was wrong. They just communicated with the ultra-Orthodox in the same way they communicated with the regular public. And that's a problem, because we don't have to assume that those people have cell phones, internet access. They don't read about what's going on in Italy because they're not in Italy. They're not in that mind space. So Israel decided or the government decided to change the way they addressed it. They talked to the rabbis rather than try to talk to the people in general. And that's more precise, because when you talk to the rabbi and the rabbi says to people, don't come to shul, they will not come to shul. Secondly, they used old media. So instead of broadcasting or doing a campaign, I don't know, online, whatever, they actually hand out pamphlets, flyers to people to explain to them about this disease. There were a car going up and down the ultra-Orthodox street saying, Chaverim, be careful, there is a virus, stay home. Things that will never work in every day, but there it worked. Definitely shows that there is a lot to do with enhancing the connection between the ultra-Orthodox public and the state and the government. There's more to do.
Okay, one more question, and then somebody asked for an update on Aviv. What about opening the borders? What are the plans for flying and opening up certain of the borders?
Oh my God, I want to go back home. Thank you for this question. It's really important. One of the things we really wanted to do over Pesach is going with Aviv, my daughter. And so my family will be able to see my daughter, me and my husband, all of us. And that didn't came about, and we thought maybe in June, and that might not happen. So when will be the time when we open the borders? First of all, Israelis can go to Israel. It was allowed all the time. I'm able to go at any time. I have to tell you that even in countries that close their borders completely, Israel managed for every Israeli from all around the world that wanted to go back home, they organized the flight for them and make sure they're home at this stage. That's a good thing. But when will the borders will be open? So first of all, now it's mandatory 2 weeks of quarantine for everyone who comes into the country. What they're doing right now, they're looking at countries who have very low numbers of cases or even none. And Israel is creating a connection to those countries. And we're talking about Austria, we're talking about Greece, we're talking about the Seychelles Islands. There's very few that Israel is building up a situation when people will be able to fly in without quarantine at all. Other people will be able to come into the country with quarantine of 2 weeks. Flights from America is opening up. I know now Delta is operating a flight. But again, if you go to Israel, you have to be in quarantine. So you have to think about that. Hopefully I don't know if things getting along, but we're hoping that at the end of the summer, maybe the quarantine will not be as necessary as now. Definitely not from America. Like America is considered to be a center of the COVID.
I just want to, thank Nadav. We always enjoy hearing from you and seeing you, Nadav. And thank you to Jaffe and UJA for making it possible for Nadav to be here. You're certainly welcome to hang on and ask a few more questions of Nadav if you would like. Oh wait, one just came in, if you don't mind, Nadav. How is the 2-week quarantine for people arriving in Israel being insured and monitored?
Yes, so Israel, I don't know if it happened here, I'm not sure. So obviously this time, hotels are empty. Who will go to a hotel right now, even though we all really want a vacation? Who would go to a hotel? So all of the hotels became Corona hotels. So the big hotels in every city was part of the army. The army took it over, and all of the people who were coming back from abroad, they were immediately tested and immediately put into a Corona hotel. And that's actually pretty cool, because when we're all quarantining, they had Zumba, they had a lot of like fun in those hotels, did a lot of cool things. But that happened for a while. They closed down most of those hotels, so they're not available anymore. But that was the way Israel fought at the beginning.
Okay, I think that's about it. Somebody had a question. They thought that perhaps there was protection of Gantz, that there was something put into the law that protects him. That was yeah, that there's something that's guaranteeing him.
There is, but well, there is the contract, and there's the way to find a way to break the contract. There is. The contract is very clear between the two parties. They are going to change after a year and a half. Whether it's going to happen or not, I don't know.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and I hope everybody continues to stay well and be well. And we'll see you.
Thank you for having me. Toda rabba. Great to see all of you.
Take care.
להתראות.